So the question is, which of the following is true of dietary carbohydrate? It is an essential fuel to the brain. It's essential to replenish muscle glycogen after exercise. It's essential as an energy source for the retina. Or D, dietary carbohydrates are not essential. And the correct answer is D. As we'll see later, glycogen stores can be maintained on low-carb diets. And while glucose is needed for the retina, this can actually be synthesized by the process of gluconeogenesis. And dietary carbohydrates are not needed for this. So you need to understand that carbohydrates are basically polymers of glucose molecules. And after digestion, these glucose molecules will find their way into your circulation. And this is why dietary carbohydrate is so problematic for diabetes. Now, the fact that dietary carbohydrate is not essential to fuel the brain, we need to go back to where that claim was first made. And that was first made in this 2002 Institute of Medicine report. And that was based on research that showed that the brain, on average, can metabolize about 100 grams of glucose daily. And then they added another 30 grams as a fudge factor. The problem is the ability to use glucose is not the same as the need to use glucose. It's quite possible to fuel the brain on ketones. So this was proven by pioneering metabolic researcher George Cahill. He took 3 subjects who had been fasted for several weeks, meaning they'd already had low glucose levels, and then he infused them with 20 units of insulin over a 24-hour period. And as you can see, the glucose in their blood absolutely plummeted. It went down to less than 1.5 millimoles a litre, and one subject even went below 1. And these subjects all remained completely asymptomatic. The neurological function was retained. And the reason is obvious when you look at their ketone levels. The ketones simply replaced glucose as a source of energy. There's no obligate need for dietary carbohydrate for the brain. Of course, you obviously need a period of keto adaptation before you go injecting people with insulin and driving their glucose down to the ground. And that period of keto adaptation takes at least 2 weeks and preferably 4 or more. Okay, so question 2. Which of these diets has the strongest evidence for weight loss with ad libitum intake? So that just means when we're letting people consume as much food as they wish, but food only of a certain type. And I would hope that most of you would realize that the correct answer is B. So over the 20-year period between 2003 and 2023, the Public Health Collaboration in the UK identified 71 randomized controlled trials comparing low-carb and low-fat diets in terms of weight loss. And out of those 71 RCTs, 39 found statistically significant results. In other words, the findings were likely not due to random chance. And these are the results of the 39 randomized controlled trials. What you'll note is that in every single one of them, the low-carb arm did better in terms of weight loss. Could there be better evidence to demonstrate that low-carb diets are superior for weight loss than low-fat diets? And what's perhaps even more surprising is that to many of you, this will probably be news. Now, you might be interested in reading more about this topic. This is a list of more than a dozen meta-analyses on this topic. The point is the science is comprehensive, the science is in, and as doctors, we should be knowing this. All right, question 3. Which of the following statements is true regarding ketoacidosis and low-carb diets? A, low-carb diets directly cause diabetic ketoacidosis in healthy individuals. Low-carb diet induces ketoacidosis by producing excessive insulin in the body. C, nutritional ketosis from low-carb diets is the same as diabetic ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis primarily occurs in states of insulin excess, or ketoacidosis primarily occurs in states of insulin deficiency. Now, the answer is E, and this is why we see ketoacidosis in type 1 diabetics who don't have much insulin. The high levels of insulin are protective against ketoacidosis. And you also need to understand there's a distinct difference between ketoacidosis and nutritional ketosis. And the conflation of the two is a reason why many people inappropriately avoid low-carbohydrate diets. Now, ketoacidosis has a pH change, while nutritional ketosis, the pH remains normal. So this is a graph comparing the ketone levels versus pH in diabetic patients. And you can see that beta-hydroxybutyrate levels have to pass greater than about 5 millimoles a litre before somebody will enter even a mild acidosis. Oh, now I'm not sure what's going on here with, there we are. Understand that ketones greater than 5, even on very strict low-carb diets, are incredibly rare. So this is a starvation study, and it shows that even after 10 straight days of fasting, beta-hydroxybutyrate levels were below 10. So if you're in ketoacidosis, it's almost certainly caused by insulin deficiency and not simply because you're on a low-carbohydrate diet. Question 4. Which of the following foods has the highest glycemic index? Cornflakes, table sugar, honey, or banana? And the answer is A, cornflakes. You might be thinking, hang on, that doesn't have as much sugar in it. The cornflakes aren't as sweet as honey or table sugar. And the reason is the glycemic index is a measure of how rapidly glucose enters the blood. And cornflakes are predominantly, as a complex carbohydrate, made of glucose. Compare this then to other sugars, however, which contain fructose. So sucrose is a combination of one molecule of glucose, one molecule of fructose. Honey has a lot of fructose. Fruit, on average, is about 50-50 glucose to fructose. We know fructose by the other name of fruit sugar. And this fructose is not measured in the glycemic index. Now, unfortunately, fructose is actually proven to be more deleterious to our health than glucose. And this is the big failing of the glycemic index as a measure. You can have fructose-rich foods that simply don't get measured in the glycemic index. So you need to understand when we're looking at foods, when we're looking at different sugars and carbohydrates and so on and so forth, we need to consider the fructose content.